Hello there. Following on from my last video about what chickens hear, you asked me to talk about what the chickens are saying. It's a really big topic, so I thought we'd start with the sound most hated by local authorities, the rooster's crow. People, and especially people who make local bylaws, think that roosters' crows are too loud. So, how loud are they? If you ask the internet, you'll commonly get answers like 100 decibels. But like so many things, the truth is more nuanced. Like many things about chickens, the real answer is, it depends. One thing it depends on is exactly who is doing the crowing. Individual roosters make different crows, just like individual people have different voices. In fact, if you have more than one rooster, you can probably recognise each individual by the sound of his crow. But which is the loudest? Some people think it's related to breed, but that doesn't seem to be borne out in fact. There is a tendency for larger breeds to crow with a lower toned voice, and for smaller breeds to have a higher pitch. On the other hand, within a breed, roosters higher up the pecking order have higher pitched crows than the subordinate roosters. Some breeds have been specially selected to have very long-lasting crows. Here are a couple of examples from rooster enthusiast Robert Hook. But the volume of a crow doesn't seem to be directly correlated with breed. More obviously, the loudness of a rooster's crow depends on how far away you are when you hear or measure it. If you put your ear or a recording device right next to the rooster's beak when he crows, the sound can reach 140 decibels. But who gets that close? Except, of course, the rooster. The further away you are from the rooster, the quieter his crow will sound. Just how much quieter can be calculated by the inverse square law, which says the sound intensity decreases in proportion to the square of the distance. In other words, if you're twice as far away, the sound will only be a quarter as loud, 3 times as far, and it's only a ninth of the original volume. In practice, of course, there are other factors that influence how loud a rooster's crow sounds to us. Background noise, such as wind or traffic, whether the wind is blowing toward you or away from you, whether the sound is reflected off a wall behind the rooster, or whether trees, buildings, or other sound obstructions between you and the rooster deflect or muffle the sound, and also the temperature and relative humidity. Sound carries better through cold, dry air. But to put it in practical terms, it's not uncommon to hear the crow of a rooster that's a kilometre, that's half a mile away, which sounds rather loud. But how does it compare to other sounds? Here are some examples. Roosters are typically louder than hens. Of course, a lot of the time hens make contented, quiet noises, but at their loudest they can reach 60 to 70 decibels. And as you can see, a rooster is right up there with a motorcycle, a barking dog, or children playing. Not that many local authorities outlaw the sound of children playing. At least a rooster only crows in the morning, right? Well, no, not exactly. It's true that roosters are most famous for crowing at sunrise. And some people trying to stop their rooster from crowing will shut him in a dark box to try to fool him that it's not daylight yet. But he isn't really fooled. In fact, studies have shown that even when roosters are kept in the dark for 2 weeks, they still crowed most often once a day, about the same time they last saw the daylight. Roosters apparently have a surge of testosterone levels each day just before dawn, so likely this is related. There is some validity to the idea that keeping a rooster in the dark will keep him quiet. As well as the circadian rhythm, rooster crowing is also set off by the increase in light, whether that's the dawn of the sun or artificial light. Many chicken keepers will tell you that their rooster crows at night in response to sudden light, like car headlights. But the same studies show that the chance of his crowing in response to random lights is greater when his circadian rhythm tells him it's close to dawn anyway. As well as the general time of day and the amount of light, a rooster is more likely to crow if he hears other roosters crowing. So what is all that crowing about? What are they saying? That early morning wake-up crow is probably just that, telling the flock it's time to get out and on with the chicken business of the day. Most of the time, he's just claiming his territory. He's saying, "I'm here, all of this is mine, and I'm in charge," to anyone who might be listening, whether that's the hens in his flock or any other hens or roosters that might be around. Of course, another rooster might crow in reply to dispute that claim. By having this crowing debate, they establish territorial boundaries. In the wild, for the junglefowl ancestors of modern chickens, long-distance crowing was more effective at telling other roosters about their presence than waiting to be seen up close emerging from the trees. Competing roosters also use crowing to establish their pecking order without any actual fighting. Once the hierarchy is determined, the top rooster will crow first, followed by the rooster next in line, and so on. It might seem like all the roosters start a chorus of crowing together, but they are aware of their designated order by rank. Subordinate roosters who crow out of turn will be quickly reminded of their place by the boss rooster. Anything that upsets the orderly circumstances, such as a new rooster or a change of environment, will result in much more crowing than usual, until everyone understands their place in the order of things. After mating, a rooster will often let out a crow in celebration. He might also crow to let the ladies know he's available and willing, but if he's serious about romance, he will use a special dance and an offering of food with a repeated short cluck. This is called tidbitting. You might think he would crow as a warning, but although a rooster certainly will call to alert the flock of a predator or other danger, his alarm calls are different to his crow. If a rooster is crowing in response to something or someone unfamiliar, it's probably more like a territorial challenge, proclaiming that this place belongs to his own wonderful self. Indeed, if a rooster is not feeling wonderful, perhaps he's sick or injured, he's less likely to crow. A full-on crow is a declaration of his confidence and well-being. Exactly how he makes that noise is interesting and probably not what you might expect. His lungs are actually quite small, and he doesn't even have any vocal cords. In my video about how chickens breathe, we saw how unusual a chicken's respiratory system is. As well as the lungs, chickens also have 9 air sacs that hold extra air. Sometimes, just before he crows, he takes a deep breath and flaps his wings, which moves the air into and through those air sacs, ready to let rip. Instead of vocal cords in the larynx at the top of the trachea like we have, Chickens and other birds have a syrinx way at the bottom of the trachea, surrounded by one of the air sacs. The tympanic membranes of his syrinx vibrate when air is expelled past them, and then the sound is amplified as it rises up his trachea. The process is rather like those party noisemakers, except that he can use muscles around his syrinx to control the tension and therefore the pitch of the sound. Young cockerels have to learn how to control the airflow and the vibrations of his syrinx. Cockerels start to crow anywhere from 5 weeks to 5 months old, depending on their breed and the environment they are raised in. Sometimes hearing the crow is the first definitive identifier of whether a chick is male or female. And yes, hens also have a syrinx and they can crow. I've caught a couple of mine trying it out when there were no roosters around, but I've never managed to catch them on camera. There's speculation about whether hens might crow because of hormone imbalance, but this doesn't really seem to explain them all. In fact, what I wonder about is why more hens don't try to crow, since they do have all the anatomy to do so. Perhaps it's just not their thing. Another fascinating detail about crowing is how come the rooster doesn't get deafened by his own crowing. As I said, right up next to his beak where the sound comes out, the volume of his crow can be 140 decibels. According to the US National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, hearing is damaged by exposure to noise above 130 decibels for less than 1 second. If that was going off right in my ear, I'd be deafened. And so would he, except that he has several protective mechanisms. Both hens and roosters can activate a stapedius muscle in their middle ear to muffle how loudly they hear their own vocalizations. In addition, when a rooster's beak is fully open, his auditory canal closes and soft tissue covers his eardrum, so he doesn't hear the full volume of his own crow. How come the hens or other roosters nearby don't get deafened? Well, of course, they don't usually have their head right by his beak, but also, as I mentioned in my video about chickens' hearing, if the hairs in their inner ear do get damaged, chickens can regenerate them. I love hearing the sound of a rooster crowing, that joyful proclamation of his own awesomeness. But we live in town now, and roosters are banned. I've really enjoyed making this video, so thanks for watching. Bye for now. See you next time.